several attendees joining us here, which is terrific. It's wonderful to see everyone.
Okay, so I'll begin.
Mr. Barrett, if we can just give everyone some additional time. I see that the attendee list continues to grow. I can see numbers. I'm not seeing specific names, but I'm seeing the number continuing to grow. So if we can just give everyone a moment to come on to this evening's meeting.
So just to give you a rough estimate, we have about 120 to 130 athletes signed up. So
yep.
We're looking at probably in the neighborhood of 200 plus people attending. Hopefully that would be the number.
Yep. Yeah, we're closing in on 100 at this point, and the number just keeps going.
Okay, great.
Great, good. I'm just preparing a letter. So for everyone on this call, we put out the call that we were going to have tomorrow be a remote learning day. It's not safe to open up our campuses for in-person learning at this point, but with power outages not really being much of a concern, I just checked in with the town to determine the extent of power outages, and it really doesn't seem to be much of a concern. We do have an opportunity to get an instructional day in tomorrow. And for every instructional day we get in, it's one less that we potentially would have to make up. So we had a difficult weather day today, a difficult weather day tomorrow. We have snow in the forecast next week already. So February is proving to be a challenging weather month at this point. We just want to make sure that we use our emergency closures very carefully so that we can maintain the scheduled winter recess and the scheduled spring recess. So Rob, I see that it's starting to level off. Our attendee list is starting to level off. So I'll turn the floor over to you. Thank you for organizing this meeting, and I'll mute my microphone at this point.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Hatter. So I just want to welcome all our parents and winter athletes for hopping on this call. I know it's been a whirlwind short week in terms of registrations and trying to get everything in place with our coaches, but our coaches have been all over it. We also welcome Dr. Cassaro, our school medical director, who has also been in contact with me several times this past week, so that we can get to this point where we can share with you what our protocols are for the upcoming season. I will move quickly because I know we all have additional meetings right after this meeting with your individual sports coaches, the varsity coaches, who will go over really more detailed protocols that are specific to your sports season. So that will happen right after. So you should have gotten a link in Family ID, and I'll mention that again before we end this presentation. But I'm going to share some of our general protocols and some of the expectations for the upcoming year. We'd like to look back at the fall as a model. We had a great deal of success with most teams getting in 80-90% of their games in the fall. That didn't just happen magically. It happened with everybody doing the right thing. So we're going to work through this. I do want to be upfront with what we're dealing with in terms of COVID as you know, is a highly contagious and infectious disease. Of course, our goal through these protocols is to mitigate some of this, mitigate the effects of the virus, and to make sure that we put in place where kids are operating in safe places. So we're going to work through those. But before we do that, the calendar has changed from our traditional sports season. I just wanted everybody to be aware of that. So the high-risk winter season is February 1st through March 14th. There is one note to that. Freshman basketball will start on February 6th, which is next Saturday. We will determine, we're working on schedules right now so that we can maximize where people will be. The reason why we couldn't finish that is because we just don't know how many kids we're going to register. We have ideas about what we've done in the past, but however, some have opted not to register. And understandably, understandably so, parents have to make determinations for their own children at any given moment. So we couldn't really finalize those until today and tomorrow, once we saw what what the numbers were. So freshman basketball will be on hold until Saturday, but we'll get started right away with that. And then I just threw in here the fall 2 season and the spring season for those of you who might be doing football, cheerleading, and boys lacrosse, along with the other traditional sports that are in those seasons that are not considered high risk. So we've taken a number of steps to mitigate the exposure of COVID-19, and included with that, as you can see, are a number of people, including Dr. Hatter, Dr. Casaro on this, our grounds, head of grounds, our custodial staffs, our principals, and so on. We also have our athletic training, school nurse, and as I said, medical director. Our school nurse has been absolutely awesome, along with our athletic trainer, in helping me to develop protocols, understand the protocols that are coming from New York State and how they might apply to our school district. So they've been great. Our YHS athletic coaches have been doing the exact same thing in terms of meeting, looking at how we can do tryouts in a safe way, because that's the most pressing issue right now is tryouts, because we have the most kids in one place at a time. So we want to find ways to break up those students so that we can do it safely. Of course, that's what's going to help with this is our student athletes and our parents. And as we go through this, you'll start to see some of the things that I'm going to ask that you're doing on a regular basis, so that, again, when kids come, we know that we're in a good place. So just to give you a heads up on what our YHS coaches have done, they've all taken the NFHS COVID-19 course, which is great. I took it myself, and it just outlines what we're dealing with and how to handle it, and what should be some pressing concerns, and making sure that, kids are washing hands and so on, all the things that you guys know about COVID as well, but it's from a coach's perspective. They'll wear masks at all times. They'll have hand whistles that we've purchased for them so that they can keep their masks up while blowing the whistle. They'll help clean, disinfect, multi-touch equipment during and after practices. We have hand sanitizer on them. We're asking them to complete COVID-19 assessments and temperature checks before coming. And we want to make sure that they're safe coming. And then just like we want to make sure that our athletes are safe when they come to the building. So I know I'm moving quickly. This is being recorded, just so you know, and we'll post it up. But again, the coaches are going to go over this in greater detail in the next meeting. So I don't want you to feel like you're missing something. So YHS athletes and parents, what can you expect? So we're going to ask that you're doing your COVID-19 assessments prior to coming to school. Again, I'm going to point out this is a very, very important piece. Okay, I send my kids to sports, a few times during the week, and I can tell you right now, our temperature, we have our thermometer sitting right there at the door before we leave, and we're taking temperatures. Of course, we're assessing whether our kids have coughs or sneezing and all the additional things that symptoms that COVID might happen. And honestly, I've stopped them with a cough. I've stopped them, when they just didn't feel right. And because I didn't want to shut down everybody else if my child was sick. So I'm going to ask that you think about that, please, when your kids are leaving. It's not like the normal days where you can say, work through an injury in practice, work through, you'll be okay. Just you'll burn it off as you run. We don't have that luxury anymore with this. So it's very, very important that we make those decisions before people get into the building, because it's already too late. The second part of that is the COVID assessment. We will move to a digital COVID assessment once we have made our teams. But for right now, while we start tryouts, I'm asking that each parent just download a hard copy of our assessment from the district athletic page, and just fill that out prior to your son or daughter coming to school. The coach will take that along with their temperature before they enter into the gym or anywhere, whatever facility they're in, depending on what sport they play. A couple of other things. Students that are doing hybrid or remote only will come dressed and ready to go on days that the days that they are not in school. Okay, so that's a very important part. There won't be locker rooms except for the students that are in school on that particular day. And again, only if they have that 2:30 slot, I should have said. Anything after that, if they go home, they're expected to come back, be ready for practice. even if they get to use the locker room at 2:30, they're still putting everything in their bags and they're taking it with them to whatever facility they're going to. Okay, so there will be socially distanced. There's markers in each of the locker rooms where students should sit, knowing that they won't be they'll be socially distant of 6, it's probably more like 10 feet away, 12 feet away from other people that might be changing. And then they're in and they're out. There's hand sanitizing stations on the way into the locker rooms. There's hand sanitizing stations on the way out of the locker room. Additionally, all athletes should be wearing masks. There's no exception to that rule. They should wear masks pretty much all the time that they're here, except for if they're having some kind of difficulty. We do have the trainer who's available, and we will designate spots where they can step away, knowing that they'll be well socially distanced to be able to take off their masks for short periods of time, if they are having some kind of difficulties. All athletes, this is another big one. Athletes love to get to practice early and their coaches always demand it. However, we are trying to limit it to that 10 minutes or sooner, to practice time as possible, because we don't want them gathering. We're going to, as you'll see later, we're going to put them in pods, and we're trying to keep them into those pods, certainly during the tryouts process, and then we'll reevaluate how we're going to do the pods afterwards based on the number of kids that make different teams. Continuing with the athletes, I'm going to ask that each athlete brings obviously their own practice gear, a labeled water bottle, and masks. So the water fountains won't be up and running. We will be able to refill if we need to, but they should bring their own labeled water bottle when they arrived. Athletes should practice, obviously, social distancing at all times. And prior to entering the athletic facilities, we ask that they wash or sanitize their hands, and of course, before leaving. We have sanitizing stations. What I've asked the coaches, and you'll see later, is ask you to bring your own hand sanitizing bottles as well, because you'll go back to your gear, where your backpack or whatever it is, when you're taking water breaks, and that's a perfect opportunity to get some more hand sanitizing in, so that we can go back and feel pretty good about where we are. Anybody who's out for injury, subs, manager, all personnel will be wearing masks, just so you know, including myself when I enter the gym or walk down the hallways as well. I think I've hit kind of the indoor masks, but I do want to hit, as you can see right here in the bolded right to side, no gaiters, which is those things that wrap around your neck and you pull them up over your nose. Those are not permitted for indoor use, and have shown to not be very effective during indoors. So please make sure that we're wearing normal face coverings that wrap around the ears, the ear loops. Okay. Continuing. The athletic trainer will be available. He is on duty during practices, but we want to make sure that we're limiting the number of interactions. The athletic training room is not overly huge. It's a nice sized training room, but it's not overly huge. We usually get 6 to 8, maybe 10 kids in there at one time. We're limiting it to 2. We did put spots on the outside in the hallway so that kids can be socially distant walking in. We did add an app, and Justin will get all your students enrolled in that so that you can make appointments ahead of time. You can give information, lower back, right ankle, the kind of normal things that happen that a trainer will help on a daily basis. So you will be able to make an appointment with some of that history of what the injury is, so that he can be prepared to make sure that he has stim ready, ice, whatever the case may be. So it's good, and it also allows us to track who was in the athletic training room at any given moment. So he'll work with that, but please make sure that we are using that app, because I think it's beneficial, but also it allows us to keep track, and that's important these days with contact tracing. So I had Tuesday, February 2nd on here. As you may have heard earlier, if you got on right away, Dr. Hatter is working on sending out notice to the school district that we will not have school tomorrow. It'll be a remote day, which now will move sports hopefully to Wednesday. As I did put in my letter to the community, and I hope that you had a chance to read it, the Department of Health, regardless of what you've read on Twitter or LOHUD or wherever it is, has not granted approval yet for winter high-risk sports. There is word that it's going to happen, but they have officially not done that, which could delay us, until it does happen. So my hope is that that'll come out tomorrow, but my hope was that it would come out today. And actually my hope was that it would come out last week. But we're moving along like it's going to happen any minute. So that way, when we do get the word, we can start right away. That's why we're having this meeting and your meeting, the subsequent meetings with the coaches. So again, for tryouts, athletes will hand in COVID-19 assessments and have their temperatures taken. Okay, very important. If a temperature is greater than 100, a student will be asked to leave, and essentially, of course, we'll put them in a place where they can wait until a parent is able to come and get them at that time. Again, I want to reiterate, though, at no penalty. If this happens during the tryout process, which it did in the fall somewhat, it doesn't penalize kids. If they miss a day or 2 days, then we would give their tryout that day. Where it gets a little complicated is if we run into that 10-day quarantine. But I'm hoping that we are doing all the right things right now so that that won't be an issue when the time comes. So the assessments, once you're in, the coaches are already starting to look at enrollment and who's there and trying to break kids into pods. Each sport has the way that they will do, like I said, their own individual sports. But don't be surprised when you see kids are broken up into smaller groups so that they can be within that small group, but also socially distant from other groups. But know that each pod will do the same drills, maybe not necessarily in the same time, but maybe at the same time. I leave that up to the coaches and their expertise there. Each pod will be given the areas where they'll place their bags, water bottles. So when they have those water breaks and they can get to their bag, take their water, do their hand sanitizing, those types of things will happen at designated spots. Coaches will try to limit crossover between groups, but inevitably it does happen. That's where the masks come into play, and our coaches know to try and keep it to a very minimum when kids are moving from one place to another, the contact with the other groups. And again, I already talked to you about sanitizer, water bottles, and so on. Contact tracing. I just want to go over this, and I'm sure you're probably pretty in tune with the contact tracing if you haven't had to go through it already, but parents, student should contact their coach, athletic trainer, and school nurse, the athletic director or superintendent when they have a suspected COVID-19 exposure. So obviously, as you can have seen in the past, immediate removal from school and athletic participation will be necessary. Again, this is for the greater good. So please just keep that in mind. Contact tracing will be used to identify potential at-risk persons. Okay, close contact, as you know, is defined to a person within 6 feet for greater than 15 minutes. So that's a 10-day quarantine, and of course testing and all that type of stuff to come back. Hopefully, like I said, we're doing the right things at this moment, but things do come up. We saw it happen in the fall with 1 or 2 times, but again, our students were doing the right things for the most part, and that kind of kept us in a good place for most of the fall season. New, not necessarily new, but more formalized from the fall is our return to play COVID positive test. This is just a snapshot of a much bigger document that's being developed, but I just kind of wanted to put it out there so you understood that there's a 3-tier system for COVID positive test and you're returning to play athletics. So the first thing I'm going to say is our school nurse has been absolutely wonderful in working with parents through all of these types of things, and is probably working with some of you that are on this call as we speak. So tier 1, and I kind of gave them the tiers. I felt like it was an easier way to explain it, but an asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic just requires a return to play note from a doctor. As we get through more harsh symptoms to moderately and severely, you start to see the increase of a doctor's note, but along with an EKG. And then severe is doctor's note, EKG, and a troponin level, which is a blood test to see where they are. Again, myocarditis is the big worry here. And, we want to make sure that kids are safe and that we're not having anybody in a bad place at any given moment. So these are all important steps. If a student has had or gets COVID during the season, we want to make sure that they're safe when they step back to the field of play. I did put a big note at the bottom, if you can see that. The Yorktown Medical Director, Dr. Casaro, will make a final evaluation on all student athletes' eligibility to play. He will take that information, the doctor's notes, the EKGs, the troponin test, depending on where your student falls in, and he will make a final determination as to their eligibility. Other logistical items I just want to quickly go over. This one hurts me as much as it hurts anyone that's watching this. Spectators will not be permitted for any indoor sports. I mean, I'm sure you probably knew it was coming as you look at the NBA and there's no spectators there. And obviously there's millions of dollars at stake and those types of things. And they're still not allowing spectators into their facilities at this point in time because of the worry about more people in a smaller, the space becomes limited. We have purchased live streaming, thanks to Tom Cole and Dr. Hatter approving that, and we appreciate that. We were able to use it and get it up running in the fall, and we hope that we're a little better at it than we were even in the fall, in which I think we felt like we got pretty good at the end there. So we're ready to get rolling once we have games started. Senior days. So we are allowed to have one senior day for, and there will be two parents, I should say, for each varsity senior athlete. And we'll do our traditional senior athletes. It'll look obviously very different. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say that it's going to be the same as having our student body in the stands and, all the other parents being there to watch. It is going to be very different, but we're going to work with what we can and to make it as special a day for all of our seniors.
Mr. Barrett, can we just
Yes.
qualify this? This is not a Yorktown rule.
Correct.
I just want to clarify that because to everyone on this call, two things. Number one, Mr. Barrett and I advocated to have 2 spectators for each home team athlete. That was something that I thought we could do safely. I thought we have the physical space within our gym. And I think you know me well enough to know that if it's not safe, we're not doing it. So I believe that we could have accommodated spectators 2 per home athlete safely. That is not being permitted, but please understand that's not a Yorktown rule. That's a Section 1 rule. So that will be the rule with any team. So what we did was, in light of the limited number of spectators we anticipated, we did go out and secure live streaming software. It will be available for free, and that might be I'm not happy with the alternative, but that is the best alternative that we can provide you at this point. So I just wanted to clarify that was not a Yorktown piece, Mr. Barrett. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. Thank you, Dr. Hatter. So we are getting close to the end here, but one thing that this past few days has come to my attention, and it might not be the best time to bring it up, but I do feel like I have to discuss it right now because we have additional registrations coming up throughout the year. But I have found that some of our students have been going on and registering themselves through Family ID. And the issue with that is that we have COVID questions that have to be answered, but we also have a 30-day interval history, which tells us about anything that may have happened in the last 30 days, concussions, a sickness, the list is endless. And if we don't have adults answering those or answering those questions and doing the registration, then we run the risk of having someone on a court or in a gym, wherever the case may be, maybe not being at their healthiest to start the season. Again, it's more for the safety of your child. So if I'm going to ask every parent that is on here to make sure that your email address is the main email address for your Family ID registration, so that you're going to get communications more regularly than you probably ever have from that app. And that way you're in the know, and that way you're not missing something that you need to know. So please make sure that that's happening. Nothing gets approved anyway without the nurse seeing it, but this is kind of jumped out at her enough that she needed to speak with me. The other piece is, and the question that I've been getting is the cross training. So we have boys basketball season going on, for example, and we may have a football player who wants to play football in fall too. Very different circumstances, usually football, basketball, lacrosse, right? Well, that's not the case right now. We will have some overlap as the season ends, but more importantly, we have our football team doing some workouts. I am not permitting that because, and I want to be clear, is that it's just another layer of exposure to a team that's in season. Okay, so if somebody gets sick, God forbid, or is dealt in a quarantine on the football team, it's not impacting them per se right now because they're not having games and they're not into real practices at that point. So, but if one of our kids that's in basketball is at football and there's an exposure, now that kid may have shut down the whole entire basketball program, quite possibly if that child ends up getting sick as well. So we're trying to limit those exposures, the contact tracing, and ultimately the closure of 2 programs at any given time. So I'm going to ask that you hold off on those extra cross-training sessions. I know our coaches are doing Zooms and those types of things. Obviously, those are no-brainers if you're trying to, if you're an offensive player or defensive player trying to pick up some stuff. But going and actually doing it, I'm going to ask that you don't. I'm going to be asking our coaches to not allow you, and they've all been very supportive of that. So please, please, please do not do that. It just puts everybody in a bad spot. So I just found this quote here, just as we're wrapping up. The strength of a team is each individual member. The strength of each member is the team. So I'm going to just say it's going to require that all of us are doing the right thing at all the time. We know it's at stake. Look at the spring season and the success of the fall season, right? We lost the spring season because there was a lot of unknowns out there. We're lucky enough to get a fall season in. And again, athletes, for the most part, did all the right things. And we were able to get, 80-90% of that in, along with the postseason, which really made for a wonderful fall season. Can we sacrifice for the good of the team? I'm asking these questions because you have to be thinking about them. The athletic program, and of course our school. Okay, I know everybody here wants to represent the Yorktown Central School District and be a Husker. You have to do it. I'm going to ask you to do it all the way around. What you're doing in school, out of school, those types of things. What are we willing to sacrifice to get the season in? I know everybody's been waiting for this moment. And I can't wait till it gets started. It hasn't started yet, but I'm hoping that it'll start very soon. And we'll be able to do that. What is important to me and to us, right? And that's the goal. We have a lot of seniors out there that would love to get in a full season, and our freshmen, sophomores, and juniors, they need to be making sure that they're doing the right thing, because I'm almost positive that the seniors will be doing the right thing because this is their last go around.
Mr. Barrett, can I make a couple of comments?
Sure, please.
All right. And thank you for that presentation. It was thorough, it was informative, and really helpful. To the students and to the families on this call, and thank you so much for making the time. I'm looking outside of my window right now, and the snow is out and it's coming down hard, and I appreciate you making the time to be on this call. We advocated for you, for the students. I see some of the individuals who are on the call with State Senator Harcum on the call, and I heard your commitment, and I think you heard my commitment, and I think you heard Mr. Barrett and Mr. DeGennaro's commitment to this. We really advocated for sports. We believe that it can be done safely. I know it can be done safely. We've seen it done safely. So I get sometimes the question, well, why are you having high-risk sports and not returning everyone to school? Returning everyone to school is not a safety issue. It's a space issue. If I need to put 6 feet between desks, we're limited in terms of capacity. Our schools are safe. Your games, I believe, will be safe, and your practices will be safe. in terms of a start date, I just want to share this. The governor said it was okay for schools to begin sports if, and this is a big if, the local health department signs off on it. I've been in communication with County Executive Latimer, who's a good friend, and I've known him for many years, since my days back in Eastchester, and just a good person, great person. I've seen it on Twitter that sports are approved. I've seen press releases. I need something from the Department of Health telling us that winter sports have been approved, the high-risk sports are approved. So once we have that, we'll begin. We're ready to begin. We've been advocating for it. Dr. Crosaro, you're here on this call. Outside of school, to be honest with you, is what is most on my mind. That's what keeps me up at night in terms of, will we be able to get a full season in? And my concern is sometimes I see behaviors outside of school. Doc, outside of school, what advice, you work in so many school districts, you've seen so many different situations. What advice would you give our students outside of school to make sure that not only can we start the season, but we can have the longest season, we can get through the season?
If everyone listened to what Rob Barrett just presented, we realized that the sport itself is going to be safe. All of these mitigating factors put in place, and they're exquisitely outlined, and very intentional, specific to the sport. The important thing is what we do when we're not in school and not during sports. I mean, it's the community time that's spent, and that's where disease is acquired. The other predicating factor is that largely disease is transmitted from adults to students and not the reverse. So the majority of infections are brought into the household by the parents. So that I'm asking parents to also take into account that if they want their youngsters to participate in a sport and go through the entire season, that they have to be mindful of every single moment, when they're in public, that they're wearing masks, that they're socially distancing themselves, that they're doing everything that we're asking the students to within the school and during sports, that they themselves practice. If we could eliminate adult to student transmission of disease, we can continue to have this fall season, or rather this spring season function. The other important thing is students have to avoid parties. It's as harsh a statement as it is. If the athlete is really intent on playing a sport, and everyone wants to play a sport, Yorktown High School is extremely athletic oriented, so that we take the entire sports season extremely seriously. So if we're going to do this, we have to continue to practice everything that we do in school during athletics, and as well as in our private time on the weekends and evenings. So during this sports cycle, make a special point of avoiding parties or large gatherings. And if you're inviting a friend over to your house, be sure that that friend is not been in contact with somebody with a positive infection, if you can have that information, and to try to avoid it altogether if you can.
If I could just add something there, Dr. Crosaro, I had many conversations with parents that were in our fall season, when they would come to the games, and they did express that they've kind of changed their lifestyles in a sense for the season, in terms of maybe not having a neighbor over for dinner and those types of things, because they were trying to be mindful of there's bringing in sickness, like you said, into the home, and finding ways to just be safer. And I admired their commitment. Usually we're asking our athletes to be committed, but our parents did step up. Well, many that I spoke to, I can't say everybody, but certainly many that I spoke to did step up, which I thought was just awesome, the commitment level.
We just have to remember that parents are part of this team process, and they're equally important in preserving and preventing illness. So if we can do everything possible, both as parents and as students, hopefully we're going to be able to get through this. And I understand the commitment and what it means to particularly the seniors. I have 3 grandsons who are seniors who are going off to college playing a sport, and they want to get in their basketball and their lacrosse season for the sport they're going to play in college. And I realize how important it is. And I've been on my grandkids' case that they have to continue everything that you outlined here. They have to continue in their private lives. So it is very important to all of us.
So I think the bigger narrative here is not about starting a season, getting the season started. I think we want to position ourselves to be able to finish the season. And for everyone who tells us that we can't do high risk sports, to tell them, yeah, sure we can, with proper safety measures that we're all putting in place. Yes, not only are we going to start the season, we're going to finish the season. And honestly, students, I wish you the best of luck. I think you're going to be great. I will try to come to as many games as I can, but truth be told, if they're not allowing spectators, they're not going to allow me in either. So I have a feeling that I'll be watching remotely with. And yes, there was a question in the quick Q&A. Will the games be live streamed? Yes, Mr. Barrett, correct. All basketball games will be live streamed. All what are we live streaming? Will we be able to post a calendar to our website, to the
Yes,
website?
absolutely. That's the next step. So we were, last week was all about getting this week up and running for practices and tryouts. This week coming up, we'll be ironing out all those details. But yes, our goal is to live stream as many events as possible, including all the sports that are here. Hockey is going to present a little bit of an issue, obviously being at an away facility, but we are even trying to talk about how we might be able to do that at least for a game or two. So, because I don't think the facility that we play at has that ability,
Right.
but the system that we purchased allows us to take our stuff and move it around, unlike a local live or something like that, where it's just into your wall and it stays there permanently. So our system does allow us to do that. So we're looking into all of the options for all of our sports. So,
Right. I think so. That was all my statement. Students, thank you so much. Parents, thank you for your support. I really appreciate the partnership, the support. Go Huskers! It's going to be a great season, and we're here for you. If you need anything, we're committed to you. We're committed to your safety. Mr. Barrett, thank you for letting me join. Doc, thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you for everybody for showing. Just before you leave, I just want to remind you that you should have, through your coaches, through Family ID, I know some did it through Sport U, received a link for an additional meeting where they're going to go over sport-specific protocols for your upcoming tryouts and practices and games. Okay. So please do hop on that meeting, on those meetings, because there'll be some more important information for you to have. Okay. I do wish, like Dr. Hatter, everybody the best. We've waited a long time to get here. Like I said, right here, let's make the most of it. And let's see if we can get an entire season in like we did with our fall sports. I wish everybody the best. Thank you.